Since you guys like the Tesla series so much, now we're going to cover Out of Shadows and basically just go over everything they talk about in the documentary. Without further ado, let's begin.
Why do you believe what you believe? Because at some point in your life, you trusted the information that somebody was giving you. And that someone you trusted told you that a car was a car, a tree was a tree, a bird was a bird, the blue stuff above you is the sky. And that's the way that we began to determine what we believe to be a fact. Most of the things that we believe to be a fact in our lives are told to us through our stories or the news that we hear. So my question would be, if they were deceiving you with the stories they tell you, would you be able to recognize that?
For the most part, no. It would just be too difficult to be able to tell what is what. It's because people get too used to how they present the news and shows and movies and stuff. Once you're so used to it and how it's presented, you're not going to question it. All right, here's covering Out of Shadows Part 1.
I've heard the term conspiracy theory. Personally, for me, I've never really had time to get into any of that because, frankly, I'm working all the time and I don't have the time to look into Bigfoot or aliens or flat Earth or 9/11 conspiracy or the JFK assassination. It's just, it's not anything that I really have any backstory on. But the one thing that I do have a lot of backstory on, the one thing I do know a lot about is Hollywood. When you think about the entertainment industry, what comes to mind? Movies, TV, music, right? Let's talk about this entertainment. I've been observing it. What if this entertainment was more than just entertainment? Now in complete control! When you're driving home from work, what are you listening to? When you come home after a long day and turn on the TV, what do you see? Think about all the content you've seen throughout your whole life. A lot of it has actually made us who we are today. So you don't know what's really going on. Have you ever stopped for just a second, though, and questioned the content? The only thing we consume more than content is air.
Here's covering Out of Shadows Part 2.
The only thing we consume more than content is air. But we actually think about the quality of the air we breathe. Maybe it's time to take a closer look at our content.
So then he brings up the popular question, is our entertainment more than just entertainment? And I mean, the way it is, we're kind of pushed to view content. It's kind of difficult to observe the content for what it really is over what it's portrayed to be. Especially when you're used to it for 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, like, ugh. And it sucks for the average people because they're just not going to notice these things. They're not used to seeing it that way. They're not used to observing and taking a step back and kind of seeing what they're being given as opposed to just taking it all in and saying, oh, okay, feed me this garbage. You know what I'm talking about. Basically, though, he's just kind of asking how much of our entertainment is really entertainment and how much of it can we really trust. Covering Out of Shadows Part 3.
Our governments always control their content. Freedom. We've just never paid attention. Freedom of speech.
This is a really good point. If the government's always been in control of the content we're exposed to, then how are we supposed to know the difference between entertainment and what's meant to keep us in fear and disbelief? I think fear and disbelief are two of the most important things too, because fear can control a person and disbelief can limit a person. So.
Please occupy our community.
To work with the CIA to destabilize foreign countries. This media that we're consuming at such a rapid rate, we need to slow down and think about what we're consuming. What if the people in charge didn't have our best interests in mind?
Another great point. Why would they have our best interests in mind? If it was, then everyone would be rich.
Now we have to ask ourselves, who's influencing our content? Is the CIA involved in Hollywood? Yes.
Here's covering Out of Shadows Part 4. Now, some people will stop the documentary at this part and be like, oh, he's just bragging about his job and how amazing his life is and how he's a stuntman, whatever. That's not the point. The point is he was picked for this documentary because of his job, because of his connections, because of who he's met, what he's seen on set, etc. All the types of things you'll pick up.
Check it. So for the past 28 years, I probably had one of the coolest jobs in the world. I was a professional stunt performer. I worked with some of the biggest stars. I've got to be Batman. I got to be James Bond. I've won World Stunt Awards. I am in this Screen Actors Guild. I'm in the DGA. I'm in the WGA. Last year, I got into the Academy, the Oscars. I've worked my way up from being a stuntman to being a fight coordinator, being a stunt coordinator, being a executive director. First big job I get, I'm on Batman Forever. And I'm walking around set and I'm pinching myself. I'm looking over, there's Tommy Lee Jones, there's Jim Carrey, there's Val Kilmer, there's Drew Barrymore, there's Nicole Kidman. And I'm like...
Covering Out of Shadows Part 5.
And I'm like, how did I get here? I didn't really say I'm gonna go be a stuntman. I wanted to go make movies. But being a stuntman was the easiest way for me to get into the business. They didn't want to be an actor because they're pretending to be a character. Well, being a stuntman, I was that character. I was the guy behind the illusion, creating it for the guy who's on the screen. I jumped out of the helicopter. I was in that fireball. I did whatever was being asked of the job.
And the reason for going over his job as a stuntman is because that's his connection to the elites. That's his connection to Hollywood. He's seen things that the average person isn't going to see. And I mean, it looks cool for the documentary, but like, that's the main reason, is because he's connected to him. Covering Out of Shadows Part 6.
I've had an amazing career, and I've had an amazing life. But in the system that exists today, as I get up the ladder, I realize it's not what people think it is. It's an illusion.
Complete
It is a
illusion.
complete illusion.
Fact. So what he's getting at is that it's not what people think at all. It's a complete illusion. They've mastered the art of making it look like something that it's not. It's all to keep us controlled. And it's your job to make the decision whether you want to be controlled or whether you want to think for yourself. So I'm going to skip him talking about how he injured his lower back, and we're going to skip to the part where he talks to the pelvic floor therapist, because that's an important part.
Okay, well, there's a woman who works here, and she is a pelvic floor therapist.
So how I met Mike, I met him, his spine was broken and he had partial paralyzation of his pelvic floor area. We help people when they have problems with the most important functions in your life, bowel, bladder, and sexual function.
So one day we're in the middle of therapy, and she stops me and she says, Mike, I feel like you have really dark spirits.
Covering Out of Shadows Part 7.
Really dark spirits over you. Can I pray for you? And I was like, pray for me? I'm like, yeah, sure, pray for me. I don't really believe in that stuff anymore, but yeah, go ahead, pray for me. So she prays for me. And I was kind of thinking while she's doing it, okay, this is weird. But okay, whatever. So for the next 2 or 3 months, I would go, and then every now and then she would stop me and she'd say, hey, can I pray for you?
I was kind of a little bit disgusted with his personality because he was all about himself and money. And I think the Lord had a lot of work to do in terms of humility with him. He made it very clear that he thought I was crazy, but he let me.
After she stopped one day, and I said, you are either 100% batshit crazy, or you think all this is real in the spirit world. And she looked at me and she said, Michael, I am one of the only pelvic floor therapists in Southern California at the time. And when these satanic people and these evil people do their rituals to little girls and women and boys, who do you think puts them back together? I do. It's completely real, and you need to look into it.
Here's Covering Out of Shadows Part 8.
I still wasn't sure if I was 100% crazy or not, but I was reading these articles and looking at these things, and I was like, I've seen things at parties. I've seen artwork. I've seen statues. I've seen things in some people's houses that just seem to be mimicking occult stuff I'm reading about. So I was like, maybe there is something to this. I'm just going to say this. I didn't find God because I went to church. I found God because I realized that the Luciferian and the other side, the occult world, was real, and that I had been fooled for all these years, and I then got really scared.
So he makes the connection between the things he's seen at parties and at people's houses, artwork, statues, whatever, and in conversation. Like, he's piecing it all together. And at this point, he is scared. Rightfully so. Who knows what these people are capable of? Most likely anything. They probably don't age. I don't doubt that they don't age. We already know about adrenochrome. Covering Out of Shadows Part 9.
I got really scared because this was the first time in my life that I was having to question my own reality. Physically, I was crushed. I wasn't going to be who I was. And spiritually, if I'm being honest, I didn't know anything about being a Christian. Really. And then professionally, everything that I knew about my career, I was starting to look at it in a different way. I was starting to question my career in Hollywood from a different perspective. So at first, I got off of social media and I made an anonymous account. I started reading blogs, looking at articles. I started reading books. I started watching videos online. I just started searching for the truth, and I was finding accounts that were searching for the truth themselves. They weren't mainstream accounts. These were accounts online that I felt like were like me. They were just looking for what the truth was.
To say that it made him question his own reality is pretty crazy. Like, waking up that much as a grown man, like living your whole entire life one way and then waking up, like that must have been insane. Then he makes all these social media accounts in search for the truth, and let me tell you, that's where it gets good. Covering Out of Shadows Part 10.
I didn't believe I was getting the truth from CNN, MSNBC, Fox. I didn't believe it. I just wanted to read it, absorb it, and digest it, and trust what my gut told me I was reading. As I did my research, I began to understand there's a very small group of people that influence all the companies that we watch. So they used to call them the Big Six. But Disney just bought Fox, and Disney controls Marvel, and Disney owns Lucas Studios. So look at that giant audience right here. Say a small group of people control the narratives and the content that we all see on all the channels. It makes you feel like, I have lots of choices. But you don't. Who's telling them what to put on those channels? Where does that lead?
So he basically figured out that all the things that we are fed in the entertainment industry, all of the movies, all the shows, are pretty much connected, and they're basically coming from the same place. So what does that tell you? It tells me that Disney doesn't plan on leaving the entertainment industry anytime soon. Up next, we're going to cover this picture with all the companies they own. Covering Out of Shadows Part 11. Basically, we're going to cover the absurd amount of companies that Disney owns. Now, if you look at this, they basically own everything relating to Marvel. They own Marvel Comics. They own Marvel Animation. They own Marvel Music. Like, basically, if it's related to Marvel, then Disney owns it. Now, let's look at this side, starting from the top left down. We got 20th Century Fox, along with everything relating to it. Then they have the Fox network groups like FX, National Geographic channels, and other Fox-related groups. They got Fox Star Studios and Fox Sports, which actually covers a lot of ground if you look at where those are located. I've never even heard of these, like Endemol Shine Group, Sky PLC. I mean, we all know about National Geographic. Sky PLC owns Hulu, I guess. This one sounds weird, Endemol. Like, kind of sounds like you're saying end them all. Like, what? It does seem like it's based in the UK, though, so I don't know. We're covering this big chunk next. Covering Out of Shadows Part 12. Alright, so we already went over the ears. Now we're going to cover these ones in their respected sections. Starting with the first one, Walt Disney Studios. Okay, this is crazy. Walt Disney Studios owns Pixar Animations, basically all of Lucasfilm. Of course they own Disney Animation and Walt Disney Pictures, but like still, Pixar and Lucasfilm? Okay, this is just like the parks, the consumer products and stuff like that, so we'll skip this one because I don't really think it's relevant right now. This is crazy. Wait till you see how many things are connected to ABC's entertainment group. Alright, we got ABC Entertainment, ABC Digital, ABC Studios right here, this whole section, Times Square Studios, ABC Family Worldwide. This one's ABC-owned television stations, which I guess is all of them. This is just straight up ABC. Then we go up here, we got A&E, History Network, Lifetime Entertainment. They got Vice, and of course they have all the Disney channels. Part 3 of these next. Covering Out of Shadows Part 13. This next one is Disney Direct to Consumer and International. They have things in here like ABC Regional, Hulu, German TV stations, like they actually own all this, including UTV Software Communications, which also comes with all of this as well. They have Movies Anywhere, which is basically like when you buy a physical disc at the store, there's a little pamphlet in the left that gives you a code and you're able to download that movie on the Movies Anywhere app. And yeah, that's just crazy as well. It's like for all movies. They have BAM Tech, which owns ESPN Plus. They got Disney Studios Services, practically all of ESPN. They even have Sony ESPN. This one called Steamboat Ventures has Photobucket and GoPro along with all these other companies and these Chinese holdings, which I don't know anything about. And you got Buena Vista Construction Company and Reedy Creek Improvement District, as well as Firo, and I don't know what these are. Never heard of many of them. Covering Out of Shadows Part 14. Next we're going to cover the ones in the bottom left and the bottom right. From what it looks like, if you read all these, it says yellow is property and parks. So I'm just going to assume that all of these are related to property and parks, so we'll skip it. And I'm not going to lie, the right side really doesn't have anything interesting to it. They are just inks and corporations, but that's still a lot of shit that Disney owns in general. Like, look at this. You're going to sit here and tell me that that's normal? They literally make Walmart not look like a monopoly. I'm honestly just surprised they got this big and own this much stuff, but then again, it is Disney, so no, I'm not really that surprised. Covering Out of Shadows Part 15.
Tonight, the FBI is on the case, and they are warning big companies in America to protect their data after a big Hollywood studio got hit by hackers and several blockbuster movies ended up online.
This is the first time the United States has accused a foreign government of a cyber attack against an American corporation. And this interested me because I worked over at Sony quite a bit during my career, and I actually had to get LifeLock during the Sony hack, so I was curious. I was like, what was this really about? Well, the narrative put out in the public was Seth Rogen and James Franco made a movie about North Korea, and so they were mad, and so they decided to hack Sony to teach them a lesson. That was a public narrative that went out, and that's what I was like, well, that makes sense. I know Seth and I know James, and they're definitely pushed the envelope of comedy, and their sense of humor is definitely their own. And I thought to myself, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, this is crazy. So when I was younger, I remember when this movie came out, and it was actually a really big deal, like releasing it in theaters, and they actually had to stop showing it in some of our theaters, and they had to release it online because they were scared something was going to happen. It really does seem like something deeper now, though, doesn't it? Covering Out of Shadows Part 16.
Now, private emails are going public.
It's a public relations disaster. But what I found really interesting as I examined the WikiLeaks documents was it showed that the heads of one of our biggest movie studios in America was in direct communication with very important people in our government. It didn't surprise me. I was like, okay, well, either they're friends or there's something more to it. So I never really thought about the government influencing our content or our stories. Could they be influencing our story and our content? These were real questions that I never had asked myself. I just did the jobs. I went to work, I did my job, I did whatever was asked, and I went home. Never thought about this stuff.
Okay, so this was like a big deal at the time. This was like a big leak that happened, and a bunch of emails got leaked. A bunch of information that just wasn't supposed to go to the public was released. And at this point, he's really trying to figure out what the hell is going on, and he doesn't know how to piece it all together himself. So that's where Kevin Shipp comes in. For those who don't know who Kevin Shipp is, he's an ex-CIA whistleblower. Let's go! Covering Out of Shadows, Part 17.
So I was like, I don't really know anybody who can answer these questions. And I reached out to this guy who I'd been watching online. His name was Kevin Shipp. And for those of you who don't know who Kevin Shipp is, he's a CIA whistleblower. He worked in counterintelligence, and he served in many capacities in his tenure at the CIA.
Okay, so Kevin Shipp is a former Central Intelligence Agency officer, intelligence, and counterterrorism expert. He held several high-level positions in the CIA during his time there. This dude had a lot of assignments in the CIA, and I'm not going to list them all because there's just too many. But I'll list some of the important ones. Fuck, I'm missing something. God damn. His assignments included protective agent for the director of the CIA, counterintelligence investigator searching for moles inside the CIA, that's pretty cool. Overseas counterterrorism operations officer, internal security investigator, assistant team leader for the anti-terrorism tactical assault team, like, what? This dude's a fucking beast. He just looks like everyone's grandpa. Covering Out of Shadows, Part 18.
Is the big picture, an official television report to the nation from the United States Army. It was an OSS memo, the precursor of the CIA, where they were doing a study of the use of motion pictures in America as a means of psychological warfare. So it goes all the way back to pre-1947, when U.S. intelligence was using motion pictures to alter the thinking of Americans in the United States.
The morale of our troops is high. The laughter, music, and general entertainment, which comes out of a single small package like this one, have helped to build that morale.
The CIA is funneling information in to Hollywood. Hollywood is putting out in the movies, and the population believes it.
Taxes to bury the Axis.
Well, this makes sense. There's a lot of cases where they put the info right in front of us and people just think it's normal, or they say it's satire. If you thought those Hulu commercials were weird, go rewatch them and see how weird they really are. And that's one example. Covering Out of Shadows, Part 19.
This document right here is a FOIA document. Anybody in America, anybody can request this. It's Freedom of Information Act. And in the 40s, they were telling you they controlled the radio stations. They controlled most of the mainstream media. They're telling you right here that motion pictures are used as psychological warfare. Why would they stop doing it?
That's it, right there. They already stated that they were using it as psychological warfare. They have no reason to go back to that. And no one noticed it, so they're just going to keep doing it anyway like nothing happened. They literally have no reason to stop doing it, especially if it was working and if no one said anything about it. And at this point, if anyone says anything about it, they're just going to be like, oh, well, it was from long ago, so, I mean, it must not be as relevant. All I'm saying is if they already stated they were doing it and no one either noticed or cared enough to say anything, then why would they stop doing it? Covering Out of Shadows, Part 20.
At no time has the CIA engaged in any political activity or any intelligence activity that was not approved at the highest level.
Alan Dulles groomed and recruited Ian Fleming, and Dulles and the CIA actually helped Fleming write his books and paint the CIA in a favorable light. And Dulles helped produce Thunderball to make the CIA and agents look like honorable, cool people. The CIA actually helped him write the books and write the script for that movie. And then the president of MPAA was actually providing intelligence to the CIA as an operative in that position in Hollywood.
He even said it was approved at the highest level for the CIA to influence politics. They even helped write the script for a movie that was meant to make the CIA look like cool people when they're just not. We just got into the CIA stuff. It's already fucked. I can't wait. Covering Out of Shadows, Part 21.
Who are contributing to a major circulation of American journals. We do have people who submit pieces to American journals.
And of course, then the CIA destroyed the rest of the files, which is what they do. George H.W. Bush came out and finally made a statement about Mockingbird. Well, we're going to officially stop the Mockingbird program. The CIA will no longer pay journalists to write stories. From now on, the program is voluntary, which means Mockingbird continues today. When's the last time you've seen a mainstream media outlet do a serious investigative report on the actions of the CIA? There's a reason for that.
This would mean that the CIA could manipulate the news in the United States by channeling it through some foreign country. And we're looking at that very carefully.
Honestly, the CIA can manipulate the news as easy as they please. Then he brings up Operation Mockingbird. He must know his shit because that was around the Cold War. That was one of the CIA's big things for manipulating the news for propaganda. And, I mean, it worked. Don't even get me started on how no one's called the CIA out on their actions. He said there's a reason why. Covering Out of Shadows, Part 22. Y'all are going to want to look at this part. We already went over this in another TikTok.
Revelations of the period of the 1970s. It seems to me the reporter's got to be much more circumspect in doing it now, or he runs the risk of at least being looked at with considerable disfavor by the public. I think you've got to be much more careful about it.
Their own personal bias and agenda control exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 Check it.
There is something about the way the CIA has been functioning that is casting a shadow on our historic position of freedom, and I feel we need to correct it.
Bop! Now, I mean, if you've been paying attention to the series or my content in the past year, you've been hip. It's no surprise the government's been on some sus shit. Each day it's more clear we can't trust them. Covering Out of Shadows, Part 23.
Senator Moynihan proposed a bill to dismantle the CIA.
Thank you.
Introduced it twice. The second time was 1995. Ironically, 1 year later in 1996, the CIA established the Entertainment Liaison Office, which was specifically penetrated into Hollywood, and Chase Brandon was actually co-wrote scripts. For example, The Recruit.
For high horsepower, high energy, very competitive people who are driven by patriotism and a sense of wanting to serve a greater cause.
I am recruiting you. Would I have to kill anyone? Would you like to?
So the CIA was and is in Hollywood, was and is contributing to Hollywood productions and that manipulation.
The Recruit. Nothing is what it seems.
So Senator Moynihan proposed that bill twice. Once in 1991 and the other in 1995. That bill was called the End of the Cold War Act of 1991. It would literally wipe out the CIA and transfer its functions to the State Department so that the Secretary of State could once again be the nation's spokesman. Weirdly enough, it didn't get passed either time. Covering Out of Shadows, Part 24.
As I started to wake up, I never actually considered that the CIA had an office in Hollywood. And I'm like, well, I see this, I see that. And I started putting feelers out, like, does anybody else see this stuff? And not many people were awake. But the one person that I reached out to was an old colleague of mine, a friend of mine named Brad Martin. And Brad and I had similar careers. We worked our way up through the business.
Is he talking about the man himself, Bradley Martin? The mafia drug lord?
And Brad and I had similar careers. We worked our way up through the business together. And I'm like, hey, Brad, you've seen this? You've seen that? He's like, yeah, for sure. And so that gave me strength. That gave me like, okay, well, I'm not alone in this deal. And I'm going to keep looking.
Okay, he's obviously not talking about this Brad Martin. He's talking about this Brad Martin, and as well as Mike, he's also a stuntman and one of the best in Hollywood, as well as a film director.
Let me just say this. Brad's one of the greatest stuntmen I've ever met. Probably the best.
Told you he's one of the best. So Mike basically needed confirmation that someone else was seeing these things so he wasn't going crazy, and that happens when you wake up. You feel like you're going crazy. Out of Shadows, Part 25.
I'm a very physically creative person. I've been doing action film movies for 26, 27 years. I excelled at the action aspect of it, at the physical aspect of doing the fights and doing the gymnastics and doing the falls and doing the driving. I trained really hard to become one of the top stuntmen in the business. I started becoming a fight coordinator, and then a stunt coordinator, and then an action director. Very few people have ever gotten to where I've gotten to, and I'm super proud of what I did.
So Brad and Mike both have been working their way up through the film industry, both being stuntman, film directors, and fight choreographers. They both worked in the same industry and noticed the same things. That's why they're talking about this so much and brought Brad into it in the first place. He's another credible source, someone who's worked in the industry for a long time. He's seen things that the average person isn't gonna see. It's just good that they're teaming up and exposing the corrupt together. Covering Out of Shadows, Part 26. So for the next couple parts, I'm only going to be speaking on it if it needs further elaboration or if it's just important. There you go.
It was a machine, and it was more of they just needed content to put out there for the masses. I stopped really watching TV. I stopped really watching movies. One of the reasons why I stopped watching movies is I got into my research on what's going on in the world right now, and all the corruptness and all of the plot twists of reality. And I started realizing that reality is 20 times more interesting than Hollywood. I mean, I was a Hollywood buff. I loved all of those movies, but now they're meaningless because I know what's going on right now actually has purpose and has a meaning, and there are consequences. And once this story is told on what's happening in the world right now, and all of the powers that be battling each other, it will be the greatest story ever told. Like, for instance, I saw something on History Channel talking about how the CIA helped Disney buy all the swampland in Florida. Well, why on earth would they do that?
His lawyers in charge of purchasing the parcels had served in military intelligence.
Covering Out of Shadows, part 27.
CIA have to do with Hollywood, or at least with Disney. Washington, D.C. is definitely in Hollywood. I have seen documents of the DOD and the CIA writing to the studio heads, guiding them in certain fashion. There's a lot of things that people talk about that are conspiracy theory, but there's some things that ring true with me. It's like, oh wow, that makes a lot of sense.
Another program developed by the CIA after World War II was called Operation Paperclip. It's been depicted in many movies, including Disney's Marvel series.
Operation Paperclip after World War II, Shield recruited German scientists with strategic value.
Thought I could help their cause.
Operation Paperclip, and this is something people need to know because it has been so covered up and mocked and berated and claimed to be a conspiracy theory. And by the way, the term labeling people as conspiracy theorists was invented by the CIA to deflect any attention over the JFK assassination. They invented that word as a way to shut down any scrutiny or this critical investigation of what they were doing. So they started that whole ball rolling. In terms of Operation Paperclip, it is documented. There's absolutely no question about it. Alan Dulles, CIA director, was associate of
Covering Out of Shadows, part 28.
Alan Dulles, CIA director, was associate of Heinrich Himmler of the Third Reich. So what Dulles proceeded to do when the Third Reich was brought down was he secretly brought all of the top Nazi scientists into the U.S. He falsified their files that he gave to Harry Truman, making them look like there were no war crimes. They brought these Nazi scientists into the CIA to work for the CIA, and that includes the human experiments they conducted on Jewish men, women, and children, and the psychological studies that had done. The CIA was using their expertise for these programs through Operation Paperclip. And this was Nazi, much of it occult beliefs that the CIA adopted and actually put these people on their payroll.
One of the programs that came out of Operation Paperclip was MKUltra. Now, MKUltra was...
I forgot to talk about MKUltra in this, but MKUltra is basically Project Mind Control. First time I heard about MKUltra was actually from my mom, and I didn't believe her, but as I got more into it, I figured out that it's all connected and it's part of it.
MKUltra was a very complex program that dealt with human experiments and mind manipulation.
Covering Out of Shadows, part 29.
As this 1952 CIA memo says, the aim is controlling an individual to the point where he will do our bidding against his will, and even against such fundamental laws of nature as self-preservation.
In the Church Committee, MKUltra came out as an actual program of mind control using mental, physical, and sexual abuse and psychotropic drugs.
Lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD. It was one of the first times that anybody had run into a powerful drug that was different than anything else that they knew anything about.
A decision was made at the highest levels of the CIA to do testing on unwitting Americans.
At Ravenscraig, Dr. Cameron went further with drugs and electric shock treatments than any researchers in the MKUltra project dared. His aim was to wipe the mind clean. Then he would implant new messages by forcing the patient to listen to a hypnotic repetition as many as 250,000 times. This was called psychic driving.
Covering Out of Shadows, part 30.
He would give the patient intensive electric treatment. He would attempt to implant new ideas in the mind of the patient.
Now, to a layman, it would appear that Dr. Cameron was trying to take the slate and wipe it clean, the slate being the mind. In other words, brainwashing.
Exactly, that's a very good comparison.
Brainwashing.
Yes.
No.
You're doing fine, just try to describe it.
Please, if I know you.
Tripping balls. Tripping balls. And for those who don't know, that's literally what LSD or acid makes you feel like. It basically just turns all your senses to 10. And you like your sensations of everything are just increased drastically. Intense butterflies, you want to touch everything, etc. Covering Out of Shadows, part 31.
Explained it to me. Nobody ever asked me if I was willing to do it or anything.
They put me on sleep treatment. And they kept you asleep for 23 days. And while I was asleep, they were shocking the heck out of me with electric shocks and playing tapes.
It was really like a concentration camp.
Want to talk to you later? You might have it this way. You look that way. Nothing for you to watch here, but you're going to talk to me as we go along.
They couldn't go any further because CIA Director Richard Helms destroyed all the CIA's MKUltra documents, and they had to rely on coached witnesses. So they were never able to dig even deeper. What they got was bad enough. It was never terminated. There's no evidence that it was ever terminated. No documents, no nothing, not even an admission by the CIA that it's been terminated.
How do you feel?
I'm feeling better, thank you.
Feeling better? Are you sleeping well?
Yes, I'm sleeping better now.
You could disable a whole city by putting a very small amount on a water supply. After all of these years.
Covering Out of Shadows, part 32.
MK Ultra was one of the hardest programs for me to wrap my head around because it's a lot of subset programs, and I was really surprised that Brad Martin knew about MK Ultra.
People think that research people are crazy for talking about MK Ultra, mind control. Even if they acknowledge that existed, they go, oh, well, that ended in the 70s. That's a crock of shit.
And perhaps the world's only hope of stopping a sinister assassination plot.
The movie that I did involving that topic was Zoolander.
The fashion industry has been behind every major political assassination over the last 200 years.
I mean, at the time, I was making a comedy and I had no idea what I was involved with. But now looking back on the movie, I'm blown away at just the propaganda.
Doesn't anyone notice this? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
In a movie like Zoolander, when they're showing you that they're controlling Derek Zoolander's mind through mind control, you realize that they're trying to desensitize you and to make you think that what you're watching is fiction because it's in a comedy.
Like a mass MK Ultra man. Their purpose is to capture the minds of the people and feed them false history. The CIA is funneling information into Hollywood. Hollywood is putting out in the movies, and the population.
Covering Out of Shadows, part 33. So now they're talking about MK Ultra and how the CIA is deeply involved in Hollywood and how they have been for a very long time. Then he talks about Zoolander, how it's a comedy, and they kind of desensitize you into thinking, oh, this isn't real because it's a comedy, so oh my god, yeah, it's just a funny movie. When in reality, they're also putting in these subtle signs and these messages in the movie that basically point to him being under mind control. Like, it's fucked up. Watch this. What is going on with her? Just watch. She's about to eat shit, bro. And they just keep dancing. Look at what the fuck. Can someone explain what the fuck that was? Covering Out of Shadows, part 34.
Putting out in the movies, and the population believes it.
All right, so look, here's the deal. They have been desensitizing us since we were born, and I'll give you some examples. Let's start with the big one. Let's start with words we hear all the time and never even think about. Let's start with the word entertainment. To entertain. What does that mean? To bind or hold. To bind or hold what? An audience's attention. Okay, now let's take the word Hollywood. Where does that come from? Well, Hollywood comes from the holly tree. And the ancient druids, back in the day, used to take the holly tree, make wands to weave spells, cast spells, or channel spells. And when they needed help, they would consult the magi's or the mediums of the day to help channel their spells to the population.
Now, if you think he's just talking out his ass to try and make this seem like there's a connection, I don't know how you even got this far into the series if you think that. I just think it's crazy he's connecting all this stuff to old magic. Like, what? They made wands out of the holly tree to cast spells and, what? Covering Out of Shadows, part 35.
Or the mediums of the day to help channel their spells to the population. We'll cut to today. What do we have in our houses? We have these black boxes. What are they called? TVs. But if you stop and you say the word television. Television. And when you turn on that television, what do you get? What's the first thing that pops up? A list of channels. And when you turn on those channels, what's on those channels? Programming. They are programming you. They've been programming your whole life. You don't even know it. They do it with your music. They do it with your TV. They do it with your movies. They do it with your games. They have been programming us and programming you since you were little, and you don't even know it because you don't even question it.
Look at that. Like I say, they put everything in our faces and make us think it's satire or comedic so we don't look into it much. Everyone has been programmed since birth, and there's not really much we can do to stop that. One thing we can do is make sure as many people as possible realize the truth.